As a game, The Evil Within was an incredibly divisive release, but whether you enjoyed it or not, most can agree that, technically speaking, it was kind of a mess. With a choppy frame rate across both consoles, a lackluster PC port, and a broken on-disc release, it was clear that a lot of changes were necessary for the inevitable sequel. And that sequel arrives this week with a new director and promises of a massively overhauled engine. So, does The Evil Within 2 manage to overcome these issues and deliver a smooth, beautiful experience? That's what we're going to find out today. Now, since we received the PlayStation 4 version first, today's video is going to focus specifically on that version of the game. Does The Evil Within 2 offer support for the PlayStation 4 Pro? And how does the frame rate hold up on both PS4 systems? But before we get into that, I want to talk about the engine. When you first start up the game, a splash screen appears indicating that this game was created using the so-called STEM engine, powered by id Tech. There's very little information out there on this engine, but the words powered by id Tech also adorn the logo for Arcane's own Void engine, which according to one of its creators was derived from id Tech 6. We're not entirely sure where the STEM engine was derived from, but based on what we're seeing, it doesn't look anything like an id Tech 5 game. This new engine supports a lot of brand new advanced visual features that were simply not available in the original. For starters, a high quality camera and per object motion blur is used this time, greatly increasing the fluidity of the game's animation. And it's a subtle enough effect that it doesn't blur the image, it just looks more impressive in motion as a result. We also see much larger, more complex environments this time around with far fewer loading screens. You can run across these large areas while entering plenty of different buildings without any hiccups at all. And when loading does occur, it's concealed in a rather clever way. It just works well overall. Texture work isn't exceptionally high quality here, but surfaces do look good enough, and the addition of high quality specular highlights helps create a more cohesive environment overall. The way the light plays off the various surfaces looks excellent here. On top of that, screen space reflections are used throughout the game now, from the wet pavement out on the streets to the shiny glass top on select pieces of furniture. The implementation is uniformly excellent. Chromatic Aberration is used as well, and while I think it looks pretty good in this game, there is at least the option to disable it for those that hate it. And these are just a few of the key engine features on display, which help differentiate The Evil Within 2 from its prequel. It's clear that the engine is a massive step forward, allowing the art team to unleash its creativity. We'll explore more of the engine in depth in our next video, but for now, let's focus on the PS4 specific features. Everything you've seen thus far then is captured on the PlayStation 4 Pro, but unfortunately, there are no Pro specific features included in this game. That's right, The Evil Within 2 does not support the PS4 Pro at all. This is starting to become an all too common disappointment. It is native 1080p on both consoles, with no additional visual benefits for owners of the newer machine. From what I can tell, at least this time, the game box doesn't have a PS4 Pro logo on it as it did with Prey, but this is still quite disappointing. Still, despite this, the image quality is generally quite good. A nice temporal anti-aliasing is used throughout, eliminating all traces of stair-stepping from the image. Well, at least most of them. It's a very clean looking game overall, despite the lower resolution. Also, the ultra-wide black bars from the original game, they've been eliminated entirely and are not even an option at all. Keep in mind that while these black bars were forced in the original release, a later patch did allow users to toggle them off. So in the off chance that you were a fan of black bars, it's not an option here. Unfortunately, there is one other issue to mention in regards to the camera work, and that's the field of view. It is extremely low, to the point where the game often feels rather claustrophobic. Now that's exactly the kind of word you would expect to hear when referencing some sort of horror game like this, and it does kind of work. The tension is ratcheted up as a result of the narrow field of view, but it also makes the game more frustrating to play. The enemies in this game are pretty fast at times, and with the slow camera movement and narrow FOV, it can definitely become a problem. But thankfully, no matter what's happening on screen, there's one thing that will not be tripping you up this time around. The Evil Within 2 offers performance that greatly exceeds the original game. Now the frame rate is still capped at 30 frames per second of course, but with the combination of excellent motion blur and the added stability, the overall experience is much smoother than before. To begin with, we're looking at the game here on the PS4 Pro with boost mode enabled. This ensures that the game basically never drops any frames. Even when engaged in combat, it runs very consistently indeed. In comparison, the first game struggled to hold 20 frames per second during just about any major combat scene, rendering that game rather difficult to play. Oh, and as an aside, you might have already noticed by now that the match system from the original game is gone. You no longer need to burn your enemies after downing them. On the flip side, the stealth system is at least still in full effect, and is more refined overall. Now, once out on the streets, we engage another large foe, and as before, the frame rate remains rock solid. So at this point then, I've played all the way up through Chapter 9, which is a decent chunk of the game, and the frame rate is virtually perfect in most situations. It's still 30 frames per second, but it is stable, and that could not be said for the original release. Which may make you wonder then, how does it run on a standard PS4? Well, thankfully, for the most part, it's very stable indeed, allowing for smooth, stable gameplay. But it's not 100% perfect, at least during cutscenes. Certain scenes, like this one, can trigger noticeable dips in performance. It's nothing too severe, mind you, but it is interesting to see the system struggle with scenes like this. But it is precisely these scenes which serve to illustrate the benefits of boost mode when using the PS4 Pro. If we pop over to the Pro with boost mode enabled, the same scene runs with far fewer issues. There's still a dropped frame here or there, of course, but overall it's much better. So if you're playing on the Pro, do make sure you enable the boost mode, as it does seem to help. Now at this point, I've only had time to play up through Chapter 4 on the base PS4 versus Chapter 9 on the Pro, and performance has been similarly stable. Most problems were relegated to cutscenes like we just saw. The gameplay is quite stable. So that's really what we're looking at then. Based on our time with the PlayStation 4 version of the game, The Evil Within 2 is light years beyond the original in terms of polish and stability. The overall visuals are much improved, and the frame rate is far higher than the original, resulting in a better overall experience. It's really that simple. None of the problems from the original game exist in the sequel, so if you are interested in picking this one up, don't worry, the console version is fine, at least on PlayStation. Beyond the enhanced presentation, the game itself has also evolved with some significant changes to the overall pacing, but it works pretty well, I think. Some reviews have mentioned an open world, and that set off an alarm for me because I'm not a huge fan of them, but in reality, it's very similar to other classic survival horror titles. The map in this game is rather similar to something like, say, Silent Hill for instance, right down to the road-blocking chasms which you have to work your way around. The main difference here is that more buildings can now be entered and there's hidden weapons caches scattered about the map, but overall you don't need to worry, they didn't make this into an open world game. So how about the other versions then? Well, I haven't had the chance to spend much time with these. I briefly sampled the PC version of the game and initial performance impressions are quite positive, at least on a Titan XP, but we'll need to do more testing to see how it stacks up. We'll also be sure to take a look at the Xbox One version. The big question there is whether or not it's going to support the Xbox One X. It would be a shame if the game did not, considering it's launching so close to the new system, but with the lack of PS4 Pro support, well, I wouldn't get your hopes up. So with that, we've come to the end of this video. If you found this initial performance analysis interesting, fun, or fascinating, be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us over on Twitter. And until next time, this is John signing off.